Your person has been avoiding one place. You'll understand. Why wait? Pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and you might not have words for it yet. But there's a softness in the air around you tonight, the kind that shows up when something is being said about you somewhere you can't see. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. Someone, somewhere, just spoke your name in front of the person who's been trying their hardest not to think about you, and the room around them got a little quieter than they expected. They weren't ready for it. They thought they had moved past the part where your name could do anything to them. But tonight proved otherwise, in a way they're still trying to make sense of as you're hearing this. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Now let me take you into what actually happened, because the details matter here. It was an ordinary evening for them, nothing significant. They had stepped out with a few people, the kind of group where no one really goes deep, where the conversation stays on the surface, where laughter comes easy, because no one is required to feel anything real. That's exactly the kind of night they wanted. Something light, something that didn't ask anything from them. They've been needing nights like that lately, more than they'd admit out loud. The lights were dim. The music was the kind that fills the silence, without demanding attention. And they were halfway into a drink they didn't really want. Just holding it because holding something feels like doing something. And then it happened. Out of nowhere, your name came up, not from them, from someone else at the table. Someone who knew you, or knew of you, or had heard your name attached to theirs at some point and remembered. And what this person said wasn't long. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't even unkind. But it was honest in a way that cut through the noise of the room and landed somewhere your person hadn't protected. Something simple. Something like, "She really did love you, you know." Or, "I always thought you two had something rare." Or, "Honestly, I never understood why that ended." It doesn't matter exactly which version of those words it was. What matters is the weight behind them. What matters is that someone outside their carefully built walls just said the thing they had been refusing to say to themselves. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that's about to unfold. Their first reaction wasn't a reaction at all. That's the part that's important. They didn't argue. They didn't laugh it off. They didn't change the subject the way they usually do when you come up. They just got quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't look like much from the outside, but feels like an earthquake on the inside. The conversation around them kept going. Someone laughed at something else. The music shifted to a different song. But for a few seconds, your person wasn't really there anymore. They were somewhere else entirely. Somewhere you used to live in their mind, and then they did what people do when they don't want to feel something. They reached for the drink. Not to get drunk, just to have something to do with their hands, just to break the pause, just to put a small wall between themselves and whatever had just risen up in their chest. They took a longer sip than usual. They stared at the table for a moment, longer than was natural. And then they came back to the conversation, smiling like nothing had happened, nodding along like the moment had passed. But the moment hadn't passed. It had just gone underground. Because here's what you need to understand about your person. They've been doing this thing for a while now, where they convinced themselves that the distance between you two was the right call. They've built a quiet story in their head, a story that says they made the responsible choice, that the timing was wrong, that you were better off without them, that what you had wasn't as deep as it felt at the time. They've leaned on that story like a crutch. It's how they get through certain days. It's how they don't fall apart when something reminds them of you, which happens more often than they let anyone see. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, somebody walked right up to that story and pulled a thread out of it. Just one thread, just one sentence. But that's all it takes sometimes. You don't need a whole speech to undo someone's carefully constructed denial. You just need one honest observation from a person who isn't invested in protecting the lie. This is where understanding slowly begins. After that, they kept drinking. Not heavily, not in a way anyone would notice, but more than they meant to. And that's because somewhere in the back of their mind, they were trying to outrun the feeling that had just arrived. They were trying to drown it out before it got loud enough to take over the night. They wanted to be present with the people in front of them. They wanted to enjoy the easy laughter and the meaningless stories. But there was a low frequency now, a quiet hum underneath everything, and that hum was your name, your face, the way you used to look at them when you thought they weren't paying attention, the way you'd say their name when you were tired, the small things, the things they thought they had buried. And then something subtle happened that no one else in the room noticed. A song came on. Not a song you two had together necessarily, but something close enough. Something with a similar mood, a similar slow ache to it. And for just a moment, their eyes drifted somewhere that wasn't the table. They weren't looking at anyone. They were looking at a memory. And the memory was you. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. They started replaying things, not on purpose. They didn't sit there and decide to think about you. It just happened the way grief and longing always happen, sneaking in through the side door when you're not paying attention. They remembered a small thing first. Something almost insignificant. The way you laughed at a joke they made once that wasn't even that funny, but you laughed anyway because you wanted them to feel like they were funny. They remembered that laugh tonight, and it surprised them how clearly they could still hear it. Then they remembered a conversation. Not a fight, not a big moment, just a conversation. One of those late-night ones where you said something gentle about who they were. Something that saw them in a way most people don't. And they had brushed it off at the time, because that's what they do when someone gets too close to the truth of them. But tonight, sitting there with that drink in their hand, they realized they had been carrying that conversation with them all this time. They had pretended to forget it, but they hadn't. And here's the part they didn't see coming. They started feeling something they had been avoiding for months. Not heartbreak exactly, something quieter, something more uncomfortable. They started feeling the shape of what they actually lost when they let things drift. Not the version of you they had been telling themselves about. Not the simplified, easier to walk away from version, the real you. The complicated, present, deeply loving you. The one who had seen them in a way no one else really had. And this is the part they're still trying to understand. Because for a long time they had told themselves a comforting little lie. The lie was that what you two had wasn't that special. That they could find it again somewhere else. That the way you made them feel could be replicated with someone newer, someone less complicated, someone who didn't carry as much history. They had even tried, in small ways, to test that theory, going on those forced nights out, letting themselves get distracted by people who didn't really matter, making conversation with strangers, and trying to convince themselves they felt something real. But none of it landed. None of it felt like you. And tonight, when that one honest sentence came out of someone else's mouth, it shattered the lie in a way they hadn't allowed it to be shattered before. Because when it's just your own thoughts whispering the truth at you, you can ignore them. But when it comes out of someone else's voice, in a public space, in front of other people, with the kind of casual certainty that only outside observers have, you can't unhear it. That's why this hit differently. That's why they got quiet. That's why they reached for the drink. Because someone had just said out loud the thing they had been refusing to say inside. If this resonates, let it settle in you. You don't need to force this. Just feel it. Now here's where the night took a turn they weren't expecting. After that moment they tried to keep up appearances for a while longer. They stayed at the table. They laughed at the right moments. They did what they could to act normal. But around an hour later, they made an excuse and left earlier than they had planned. Said they had something in the morning. Said they were tired. Whatever the excuse was, it wasn't the real reason. The real reason was that they couldn't be around people anymore. The hum had gotten too loud. The memories had gotten too vivid. They needed to be alone with whatever was happening inside them. And on the way back, somewhere between the venue and home, something else happened. They thought about reaching out to you. Not in a dramatic way. Not with a long message. Just a quiet, hesitant pull. The thought of opening your name on their phone. The thought of looking at your last conversation. The thought of seeing if you had said anything online recently. Just to know you were okay. Just to feel close to you for a second without actually crossing any lines. They didn't do it. Not tonight. They came close, though. Closer than they've come in a long time. They actually picked up their phone at one point. Their thumb hovered. And then they put it down and stared at the ceiling for a while in the dark. That moment, that small, almost invisible moment, is more important than it looks. Because for months, they hadn't even let themselves get that far. They had been playing a game with themselves where they pretended you didn't cross their mind that often. Where they would push the thought away the second it surfaced. Where they would distract themselves so completely that they could almost convince themselves they were over it. But tonight, for the first time, they let the thought stay. They let themselves sit with it. They let themselves feel it instead of running from it. And that is a much bigger shift than it might seem from the outside. This is where things quietly began to shift. And the shift didn't happen in a single dramatic moment. It happened in the spaces between thoughts, in the quiet of the drive home, in the way they didn't turn on any music when they got back, in the way they sat on the edge of their bed for longer than usual before lying down, in the way they kept replaying that one sentence someone had said about you, turning it over in their mind, examining it from different angles, wondering why it had landed so hard. And underneath all of that, a question started forming. A question they had been avoiding for months. The question of whether they had been wrong about everything. Wrong about the timing. Wrong about needing space. Wrong about who you were to them. Wrong about what they had walked away from. Not in a self-punishing way. Not in a spiral. Just an honest, grown-up question. What if I misread this whole thing? What if I let go of something I shouldn't have let go of? What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. Because this is where their perspective on you started to shift in a way they couldn't undo. Up until tonight, they had been holding on to a version of the situation where they were the one who had moved on, the one who had made the harder, more mature choice, the one who was doing okay. But tonight, with that sentence echoing in their head, they had to face the possibility that they hadn't moved on at all. They had just been better at hiding from it. They had just been outrunning the truth in smaller, more sophisticated ways. And the truth was simple. The truth was that they had loved you in a way that was rare. The kind of love that doesn't show up on schedule. The kind that doesn't come around twice with the same person. They had known it at the time. They had felt it. But they had let fear, or pride, or the wrong kind of timing, or whatever it was, convince them to walk away from something that was actually trying to be theirs. And now here they were, months later, sitting in the dark, realizing it. Maybe I let go too quickly. That's the thought that came up first. Then a few minutes later, why does this still feel unfinished? Then later, why did hearing her name from someone else hit like that? Those thoughts didn't come all in a row. They came in waves, with long silences in between. The kind of silences where you're not thinking about anything, but everything is still moving inside you, and the whole time something about you stayed with them. The version of you that exists in their memory. The way you used to be when you felt safe with them. The softness you only showed them. The way you cared about things they didn't think anyone noticed about you. They started missing those specific details. Not the big things, the small things. The way you would pause before answering a hard question. The way you texted in your own particular rhythm. The sound of your voice when you said their name a certain way. This is the part they're still trying to understand. Why now? Why tonight? Why one sentence from a near stranger could undo what months of distance had carefully built up? And the answer is something they may not be ready to articulate, but it's something you should know. Some truths can only reach us through other people. We can hide from our own thoughts, but we can't hide from the moment when someone outside of us names what we've been avoiding. That's what divine timing actually feels like. It's not loud, it's not a sign in the sky. It's a moment that wasn't supposed to be significant, that ends up changing the direction of someone's heart. And tonight was that moment for them. Not because anything dramatic happened, but because something honest was said, and they couldn't unhear it. There's a verse that comes to mind here, and it fits, even though they may not have thought of it consciously. The heart is deceitful above all things, and who can know it? They had been deceiving themselves for a long time about you, about what they felt, about what they had let go of. And tonight, the deception cracked open just enough to let the truth in. And once that crack is there, it doesn't close back up the way it used to. Stay with this, because there's something here for you too. Because while they were sitting in the dark, doing the slow work of feeling what they had been refusing to feel, something on your end was shifting too. Maybe you don't have words for it yet. Maybe you've been feeling restless in a way you can't explain. Maybe you've been sensing something coming, even if you've also been preparing yourself for nothing to come at all. That tension you've been carrying is part of this. It's not random. It's connected to a moment happening on the other side of all of this, in someone else's quiet room, in someone else's quiet thoughts. Their growing realization is going to take time to translate into action. That's important to say. They're not going to send the message tonight. They might not send it tomorrow. They might sit with this for days, or longer, before they figure out what to do with it. Real change in people doesn't happen all at once. It happens in layers. Tonight was a layer, a significant one. But there will be more layers. More moments where the truth keeps coming back at them, in different forms, until they have no choice but to act on it. And that's why what's happening right now matters so much, even if you can't see it. Because every layer that lands changes them a little. Every honest moment they can't run from rewrites a piece of the story they've been telling themselves. And eventually, the story doesn't hold together anymore. And they have to write a new one. And the new one starts with reaching back toward you in some form, however small, however hesitant. If you've felt this shift too, you already understand. You've probably been feeling it for a while now. The quiet sense that something on their end is moving. The way you've been thinking about them at strange hours. The way certain memories have been showing up uninvited. None of that is your imagination. It's the energy between two people who aren't actually finished with each other, even if life has tried to make it look that way from the outside. Here's what I want you to hold on to as this lands in you. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to send a message. You don't have to make the first move. You don't have to figure out the timing. The work is happening without you. The shift is happening on their end, in their time, in the way it needs to happen, so that when they do come back around to you, it's real, and it's grounded. And it's not just a temporary impulse from a hard night. Your job right now is to keep being who you've been becoming, to keep showing up for your own life, to keep softening into the version of you that doesn't need to chase anyone to feel chosen. Because that version of you is exactly the version that is pulling on them, even from a distance, even from across whatever silence has been between you. Tonight, in a room they didn't expect anything from, someone said your name out loud, and something in them remembered. Something in them woke up. Something in them realized that the easy story they'd been telling about your two paths separating was not the whole story. not even close. And what they're beginning to realize now is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.